Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast, your filthy casual place for all those filthy casual takes on the world of sports. I am your host, DylanLasagna. This is episode number 151 of this icy yet spicy podcast. Today, we're continuing our coverage of the 2023 NFL season preview month here on Very Cold Lasagna. We've already covered 2 divisions in the NFL, and yeah, there's still a long ways to go. Our NFL season preview month. But no fret, we still can do it. We still got plenty of time left in NFL season preview month. And sooner you know it, we'll already be halfway done. We'll be done with the NFC, and then we'll be on to the AFC, and then we'll be done. We will be done, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway, I digress. We've covered 2 divisions in the NFL so far. We already went west to the NFC West. We already went up to the snowy north in the NFC North. And now we're about to go down south, the NFC South, in part 3 of our NFL season preview coverage for 2023. I got to be honest with you, though. This one's going to be pretty rough to talk about because I'm going to feel sorry for all these people having to watch these division games. I'm just going to have to say it. Yeah, this is going to be oof. I might be wrong. But whether you're a fan of these 4 teams or not, this could be some ugly football be played by the NFC South Division. It could be rough. It could be probably rough. I'm just going to point it out there. I'm going to spoil it now. This could potentially be rough. But anyway, we're going to talk about the NFC South Division in just a bit. But we got to take a little bit of housekeeping business first. First of all, social media. Make sure you're following me, if you're not already, on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna to stay up to date on anything in relation to the show, or you want to see my extra filthy casual takes on social media. Again, that's at Very Cold Lasagna. And you can also send me your own opinions on what I talk about or rattle off on something I say on social media as well. And make sure you listen to the show on audio, on whatever audio platform that you do, whether it's on Spotify, Anchor, not Anchor FM, I keep saying that, but it's rattled my head. Spotify for podcasters, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Rate and review the show, share it with your friends, do what you can to support the show. And then on the YouTube side of things, make sure you subscribe, smash the like button, leave a comment, do whatever you can to support the show. Your support really means the world to me, man. And I gotta say, like, the uptick in support the last couple of weeks, in the last month, it's been like crazy, man. It has really been crazy. I mean, like, it's not like a big boom or anything, but it's been really nice to see. It has been really nice to see, and I really want to thank you all. I really want to thank you all for the support, like the actual support that you've been giving me. For Very Cold Lasagna. And for all the new people that are here, welcome. Welcome to the Very Cold Fridge, and I'm glad to hand you this Very Cold Lasagna. Not an actual one, but there you go. But anyway, let's keep the gravy train rolling with that Very Cold Lasagna inside that Very Cold Fridge. So now, before we get into things, I want to share my thanks by starting things off with some fan mail. There was a couple fan takes, some fan comments on YouTube that I wanted to share with you all, and provide some some actual takes that were provided on a couple of my NFL season preview videos that were posted on YouTube. So that being said, again, I always encourage all of you to provide your own opinions on anything I say. Either if you agree with me or disagree with me, we can always have a conversation about it. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer here. So yeah, I always encourage that stuff. So anyway, when it comes to the Seattle Seahawks preview that I talked about, there was a comment on YouTube that Justin Pritchard 5226 said that was kind of like thinking a different record for them. So he said, I think we'll be better than 9-8. I say either 11-6 or 12-5. So that sounds pretty bold. And again, as I mentioned, that, they did make some good improvements on the offensive line And I think they added a backup running back. And then the defensive line, has a little bit more depth to it. And then they did some good work on the secondary. And then I'll go back to that receiver's name. I'm going to go to that comment too. But a lot of it's going to depend on how Geno Smith plays. As I said before, that's going to be the main thing that's going to determine Seattle's season. Is Geno Smith not a flash in the pan? Is he not going to be a one-year wonder? So it's going to depend on how he plays this season compared to last year. Can he carry over that success from last year to this year? It's going to depend. So thank you, Justin Richard 5226. Staying with Seattle, Timothy Gatherings 1531 said, "You know what Pete Carroll realized? That without a running game, you have nothing. So hence, that's why they drafted a backup running back in day 2 of the draft. So they got a little bit of insurance and a little bit of help for Kenneth Walker III, because when they did shut him down, I think in various teams did, they forced Geno Smith to throw that damn thing. They really tested him. And sometimes he passed, but a lot of times he did fail, including that first round game against the 49ers. But the 49ers were just too good in that wild card game. And then there was a second part of that comment that said, if you're not smart enough to say Njigba, just say JSN. I know you've heard of him. And yes, I heard of Jackson Smith Njigbu. How I pronounce it? They actually provided how to pronounce it, a pronunciation. Njigbu. So there you go. Jackson Smith Njigbu. So I'm willing to admit that it's very hard for me to remember names and actually pronounce very complex last names, just names in general. It's very hard for me to do these kind of things. So it's just very difficult. It is very difficult. So apologies. I at least try to get these names right, but it's just, again, very difficult. So thank you, Timothy Gatherings 5031 for your comment. And then last but not least, we have a comment by Jeff Benjamin 6480 talking about the Green Bay Packers, leaving a comment on the Green Bay Packers. He says, I don't get why everyone is so down on Romeo Doubs. I thought he looked good for a rookie before he got hurt. So I mentioned in a reply that he looked good. He did look good. I'm not going to disagree on that. It's just that after he got hurt, he got less targeted when he came back. And that was because Christian Watson stepped up to the plate. And he also mentioned that in a reply later, Aaron Rodgers doesn't like rookies. Yes, that's something I can agree on. But then he went on to, finally trust in Christian Watson. And that was the only receiver that he could trust in that offense outside of course, I guess, Allen Lazard. So, yeah. So, Romeo Doubs, definitely lost a lot of targets when he came back. So, there's some things that he has to prove in 2023 to prove that, if he can translate his skills from 2022 and maybe he can get even more opportunities to shine this year. Now that he has Jordan Love as quarterback, we'll see. So again, thank you for the number of people that have left comments on my season preview videos and just any of my videos in general, any of the videos on YouTube in general, on the episodes, the clips, the extra stuff, you name it. And again, if you want to leave your own opinions, again, do so on YouTube or send a direct message on my social medias at Twitter and Instagram. Yeah, I love to hear your takes on what I have to say. So thank you. Thank you for your opinions on what I have to say. So now let's move on to our main meat and potatoes of the day. And that is, of course, talking about part 3 of our NFL season previews. And that is going down south to the NFC South. So 1 year ago, when we were talking about the NFC South, it's probably the second least interesting division to talk about. And that was because 3 of the 4 teams, they didn't exactly do anything to challenge the team down in Florida that had won a Super Bowl during the pandemic. And of course, they had they had a quarterback that has won seven of those damn things. And then they thought that quarterback retired. But then he came back. He came back. And that team was obviously going to win that damn division. So the other three teams, they didn't exactly do anything to hopefully challenge that team down in Florida. They actually downgraded, in fact. So it was expected that that Florida team was going to run away with the division yet again in 2022. But it actually proved opposite, almost opposite of that. So when the season came around, things got really interesting. And not in a good way. This division was very awful. This was very bad. Every team managed to be in contention for the division towards the end of the season with a losing record, mind you. So that Florida team was probably just as bad as everyone else in that division. So that Tampa team, let's just spoil it out there. That Tampa team still came out on top, but it was clear as day that dominant force that they were for the last 2 years in that division, it was not there at all. It was not there at all. And, the quarterback under center in that division and in that team, it looked like, death's door was knocking down on him. So, yeah, that division leading team was unceremoniously knocked out of the playoffs, and out he went. Out he went into the sunset for good. So now that quarterback has fully retired, the winds have changed, have come around down south when we thought it would last year. So now you have all these new faces around the division ready to take the reins under center for all four teams. Just kind of like the NFC North. This division is now wide open, but not as interesting as the NFC North, to be honest with you. But that being said, I can be proven wrong. As just as many else can be proven wrong. So that being said, we're going to take a look at all four of these teams in today's episode. So we're going to find out if any of these teams can make for a interesting race in this NFC South Division title race compared to last year. So let's go ahead and take a look at the NFC South Division in 2023. So we begin our NFC South season preview for 2023 by taking a look at the team that had an identical record as nearly everyone else in that division, and that is the Dirty Birds in Atlanta, the Atlanta Falcons. So for the Falcons in 2022, it was kind of looking more of the same in terms of their outlook, because they're mostly coming back with the same roster with a lot of short-term options, except this time around, you had a new quarterback in town by the name of Desmond Ridder. They drafted him in the 3rd round from Cincinnati, and everyone was wondering, when are you going to play the kid? Instead, though, he went most of the season with Marcus Mariota as your starting quarterback. Now, Marcus Mariota wasn't outright terrible for the most part, but it's just that he wasn't coming in clutch for you when he needed him most. But despite all that, the Falcons actually managed to win a couple of close games to compete in a very weak division. The problem was they fell apart late in the season, and so did Marcus Mariota, to be honest with you. They suffered a couple of key injuries as well, and once they started falling apart with 4 games left in the season, head coach Arthur Smith decided, you know what, fuck it. We're not getting back in this division race. He finally decided to see what 3rd-round rookie Desmond Ridder could offer them. So it kind of was like, well, wasn't that supposed to be the goal in the first place in 2022? Yes and no. But either way, they did see what Desmond Ridder could offer in those 4 games. 3 of those 4 games were not good. To be honest with you, looked kind of shaky, and that was to be expected when you haven't played for most of the season, just sitting behind on the bench, trying to learn from Marcus Mariota. And in that meaningless game against Tampa at home in that season finale, I mean, he looked a little bit better, but again, it's only 1 game. So obviously your goal for 2023 is to determine if Desmond Ridder can be your starting quarterback. Can he be that centerpiece to maybe lead the franchise for whoever knows how many years? So some of my team needs for the Falcons when I did my season recaps for them was mainly on defense. They had to resign their top 2 defenders and linebacker Rashaan Evans because he was one of their good covermans, and he was a good tackler as well. And corner Isaiah Oliver, he was one of the very few gems in that defense that could actually go toe to toe with other opposing receivers. And then they had to use the draft to add on defense because, my God, their secondary was awful. It was so bad last year that I guess a good portion of them losing games was because they just could not cover. They just could not cover. They also couldn't get to the quarterback, except for I think that one game against Tom Brady and the Bucks. So, yeah. They also had to find another receiver to support Drake London and Kyle Pitts because they actually didn't have Kyle Pitts for a large chunk of the year. It was mainly Drake London. That's it. It was a bunch of scrubs alongside Drake London. And they had to retool the offensive line because they didn't exactly do a good job protecting Marcus Mariota in 2022. So they needed to add a couple more pieces to protect Desmond Ridder this year. So I was looking at some of their moves in this offseason. They re-signed Caleb McGeary, one of their tackles. So he's been a solid piece for them. And then they re-signed Bradley Pinion. Ever since he left the 49ers, somehow, some way, he's gotten better, I guess. So good for them. They did manage to lose Rashaan Evans. They decided not to re-sign him, I guess. Isaiah Oliver went to the 49ers, so rough. And they did lose Marcus Mariota to the Philadelphia Eagles. So I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's not really too much of a loss because look who they added in free agency. They went on a spree. They went on a spree of sorts. They got Jesse Bates from the Cincinnati Bengals. They lured him away. Like, wow. I didn't expect Atlanta to actually go and get him. So that's big for them. And for their defense. So I'll talk about Jesse Bates' addition to the defense in just a bit. They also got Mike Hughes, a corner from the Detroit Lions, via trade they gave the Lions a 5th-round pick. I think it's like Mike Hughes like next team in like several years. Like he's only been on like one team like during his one time, a couple teams in his tenure. So hopefully this is the team that sticks with him. They also added a couple interior defensive linemen. Calais Campbell from the Baltimore Ravens. He's on the older side, but he does get the job done. You just have to like rotate him in and out because again, he's like 37. But again, age doesn't really all that matter that much. And then David Onyemata for the New Orleans Saints. He was one of their more efficient pass rushers in a down year for the New Orleans Saints last year. Edge rusher Bud Dupree from the Tennessee Titans. The only thing is that he is coming off 2 straight seasons with a torn ACL. So maybe he does bounce back in Atlanta, but we shall see. They also got Mac Hollins from the Las Vegas Raiders, one of the receivers that really had to step up with the injuries by Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller. And I mean, he was actually Derek Carr's go-to man when he literally had Devontae Adams right there, but Mac Hollins was like the preferred option, I guess. So, hey, at least you got something. And then backup quarterback Taylor Heineke from the Washington Commanders, just in case option, if Desmond Ridder doesn't perform to expectations. And then the draft is where things got really interesting for the Falcons. They got a running back by the name of Bijan Robinson from Texas Tech. That move really surprised me because didn't they have a running back that literally broke out in 2022 that really did well? I don't have the name at the top of my head, but he did really well for them in the later half of 2022. And I was a little curious why they decided to go for a first round running back. Now, don't get me wrong. When I scouted, again, in air quotes, Bijan Robinson, my filthy casual analysis on him, I thought he was a pretty good running back. It was just weird for the Falcons to take him this high. So I'm not too against it, but it was just kind of odd. But it does give the Falcons some running power and some balance for Desmond Ridder too. They also got a tackle by the name of Matthew Burgeon from Syracuse, so I like that move. It gives some more protection on the offensive line. They also got an edge rusher by the name of Zach Harrison from Ohio State, and then corner Clark Phillips from Utah. So the Falcons, when you look at their offseason as a whole, they got stronger defensively. Again, it's gonna only matter when the results come in on the field. But when you look at it, like what they did during the offseason, getting Jesse Bates was a big move for them. He's great in run defense and very good in pass coverage, especially last year. And he's very critical for the Bengals. So his addition is going to be a big time boost for that secondary that was very awful last year. And then the new addition to the defensive line should help as long as they stay healthy, like Onyemata, Andy Goldman, Calais Campbell. And then the only thing is receiver on the offensive side, I think it still needs a little bit of need. Yeah, sure. You got Mac Hollins, but he's a little bit more slot receiver. I think you need that second option opposite Drake London. And yeah, they did get Scotty Miller, but it's like he was mainly a reserve slot receiver too. So yeah, they do need a second option. Hopefully, maybe there's one that gets released after final cuts. Maybe they can get one there. I don't know. Or maybe this is the year that Kyle Pitts stays healthy. He breaks out in year 3, but defenses are going to go double him and Drake London very frequently. And Desmond Ridder is going to need more than just those two to throw to. So looking at some of their key games in 2023, because that's going to be a wide open NFC South for as weak as it is. It's the first 2 weeks. You start at home with the two home game stretch against the Carolina Panthers, against, who knows, it could be Bryce Young or it could be Andy Dolan, and against Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers. So if you're Desmond Ridder, if you're Arthur Smith, this is kind of a good opportunity to strengthen your hold on the NFC South early. So get your a good opportunity for Desmond Ridder to get some run in on some pretty bad opponent, potentially bad opponents. And then the big test comes in in week 7 against the Tampa Bay Bucks on the road. So who knows who's going to be the quarterback by then? Is it going to be Baker Mayfield? Is it going to be Kyle Trask? And who knows how they'll stand by that point? So obviously the big question is going to be, what can Desmond Ridder offer in year 2? He only had a very small sample size, 4 games at the end of the last season. He looked pretty rough, but again, expected when you had Marcus Mariota start for most of the season. And a little bit understandable because Marcus Mariota was, they put him in because the Falcons were kind of within striking distance of nearly winning the NFC South, and then they fell apart late in the season. But at least that last meaningless game against the Bucks, there were a little bit of signs that, okay, maybe we can give Desmond Ridder a shot, because keep in mind they only got Taylor Heineke. So now that he's had a full offseason of being trying to get some starters reps, can he offer something that the Falcons haven't had since Matt Ryan, since they traded him away? So overall, for all the Falcons have done this offseason, maybe there could be a chance for them. Because, considering how very weak the NFC South is. Now, I don't expect them to make a deep playoff run, but I do expect them to fight just as hard as they did last season. So, even with questions surrounding Desmond Ridder, how well is he going to perform or how bad he's going to be, I do think they still have that puncher's chance. Arthur Smith, he is a coach that shows no nonsense. He really wants his team to play hard. And they've shown that in the last 2 seasons. Sure, they've ended their season 7-10 the last two years, but even in a very weak NFC South, even if they might go one and done in the playoffs, hey, it's something, I guess. And I guess the important thing is for Atlanta is that Desmond Ridder has to show something this year. So maybe they do have a puncher's chance to win the division title, and perhaps they do. So maybe at 9-8, that could be enough for the Falcons to claw and steal that division title from the rest of the NFC South. So next up, we're going down to the Big Easy, which is actually the Big Hard for the last few years, and that is the New Orleans Saints. Yeah, like I said, it's been the Big Hard for the New Orleans Saints these last few years, and that's because, well, you don't have Drew Brees anymore as your starting quarterback. You don't have Sean Payton as your head coach anymore. Now you have Dennis Allen as your head coach, and you have a revolving door of quarterbacks in your room. So it's been like, yeah, how are we going to solve this issue? And they haven't. So for the Saints these past 2 seasons, it's been a very slow downward spiral. 2021 saw them, they looked like they were going to have some success. But then midway through the season, Jameis Winston gets hurt, lost for the season with the torn ACL. And then they ended the season 9-8, but they barely missed out on the playoffs. And then you get to this past season in 2022, it's more of the same song and dance. They struggled with major injuries to a lot of its key players, and again with Jameis Winston. And then on top of all that, you get mediocre quarterback play that replaces Jameis Winston in the form of Andy Dalton. That's hence the reason why New Orleans wasn't outright terrible, but then they weren't exactly great, because you know what you're getting with Andy Dalton. He's not going to provide you spectacular play, but he's also not going to provide you terrible play either. He's just going to be that mid guy. So even that wasn't enough for the Saints to claim the broken mess that was the NFC South, because, well, their own problems did them in. The injuries, the broken defense, the broken offense. The team was just broken as a whole. Even with all the people that were coming back towards the end of the season, it was just too late for them. They did win against Philadelphia, so that was like their one big win of the season. But it was just too late for them. They got eliminated after some tiebreakers, and they ended their season 7-10. So for New Orleans, you really had to figure out a lot of things. You were once again fighting against the salary cap, a lot of money in the red. But not only that, you really needed to find a quarterback, man, because it's clear that Jameis Winston, for as much potential as he's shown in New Orleans, like, he had that one good first half of the season in 2021, but he got hurt. He just might not be able to rely on him to stay healthy. So those were your 2 offseason priorities. You had to get under salary cap again. You had to restructure some contracts, and you had to find a quarterback, man. Like, you desperately need to find a quarterback. And boy, did they find one. I don't know if it's going to be a good one either. So the Raiders definitely helped out the New Orleans Saints when they released Derek Carr. Yeah, they released Derek Carr. They gave that car down to the Big Easy, which could be getting even big harder. So New Orleans, they signed Derek Carr when he got released, when free agency started. Oh, actually, they didn't even need to wait till free agency started because, well, he already got released. So Derek Carr signed a big fat contract to go to New Orleans, sign with the Saints, and now he's their quarterback for the next couple of years. A pretty interesting decision by New Orleans, but I mean, maybe he could provide some kind of upgrade. But yeah, keep in mind that his last season with the Raiders was not exactly that great. And we'll get into that in just a bit. So looking at some of their offseason moves for the Raiders, not for the Raiders. I keep saying the Raiders because, well, Derek Carr's there. For the Saints, they did lose a couple of key players because, well, they were in the red, like big in the red again. They've lost one of their top edge rushers in Marcus Davenport to the Minnesota Vikings, but he did have a down year in 2022, but it's possible he could bounce back with his new team, Minnesota. They also lost one of their good interior pass rushers in David Onyemata to the Atlanta Falcons. Excuse me. Safety Justin Evans to the Philadelphia Eagles. And this could be a big one to them, guys. Andy Dalton to the Carolina Panthers. Oh, no. So, yeah, they let Andy Dalton go because, well, you have Derek Carr now. They did re-sign Jameis Winston. So, I mean, it doesn't hurt to keep him on. And I don't think Jameis Winston minded that he stayed on. So, I guess that's something. And then, of course, you had the big move to get Derek Carr from the Las Vegas Raiders once he got released. And then a couple of interesting ones to note. Running back Jamal Williams for the Detroit Lions. They didn't give him like a big fat deal. But, I mean, I wonder how they're going to use him considering that his second half in 2022 was basically him just vulturing touchdowns from DeAndre Swift. That's what he mainly became known for. Vulturing touchdowns from DeAndre Swift in the Lions' like big second half run in 2022. So it's like, okay. They did sign a safety by the name of Jonathan Abram from the Seattle Seahawks. So, it could help Tyrann Mathieu some. So we'll see. Backup tight end Foster Moreau from the Las Vegas Raiders. So Derek Carr, one of Derek Carr's preferred target when Darren Waller was injured. So he comes from Vegas to the Saints with Derek Carr. And then receiver Byron Edwards from the Atlanta Falcons. And then looking at some of their draft moves, they drafted another interior defensive lineman by the name of Byron Breesy from Clemson. And when I looked at Breesy, he has some very good pass rushing tangibles. He can really get within the interior. He really has some good hand fighting. I did look up though. He has some very glaring injury concerns. So New Orleans better be careful. They better keep him healthy. They also fortified their pass rush even more by signing Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. They drafted him actually. So some decent moves within the pass rush. They also got a running back, Kendre Miller from TCU. So getting some more insurance just in case Alvin Kamara gets hurt. And then an offensive lineman by the name of Nick Saldiveri from Old Dominion. So yeah, that was a solid move by the New Orleans Saints to get some protection up front for Derek Carr, because that offensive line was not good in last year. So now with all these moves considered, obviously you got a quarterback that could hopefully help you out. I don't know. But obviously your goal if you're New Orleans, now that you had acquired all these people, is to win the division, win the NFC South in 2023. That's your goal. But the thing is, what I took away from this offseason for New Orleans is that, is it going to be enough? Even with all these additions, all these solid additions, is it going to be enough for the Saints to really make a run at the division come regular season time? Because keep in mind, last year they made the big defensive move to go and get Tyrann Mathieu, but they didn't really do much in the grand scheme of things, because honestly, when you look at it, since 2021, the Saints just run into some really bad luck, like especially on the injury bug. And it was the same case in 2022. It's just like they have to find a way to get past that injury luck, like the bad luck, because these new ads, like I don't think it's going to be enough. And again, I don't want anyone to get injured, but it's just like they got to find a way to stay healthy, man. They really do. This time could be different, but who knows? Who knows? But I will say the defense does look a little bit more solidified than the last few years, because, well, they did add some more interior defensive linemen and depth at the edge rusher position to help out Cameron Jordan. Like, dude, the dude need help, man. He just lost like some key players, like what was his name? Marcus Davenport and David Onyemata in free agency. Cam Jordan definitely needed some help there. So yeah, good on New Orleans to at least get him some help. Now, looking at some of their key potential games in 2023, if they're going to try to compete for the NFC South, is starting in week 1 against the Tennessee Titans. How is Derek Carr going to do in his first game at home as a New Orleans Saint? It's always going to be the big test. See how he does. And then week 2, you're on the road in your first division game at Carolina against the Panthers. Whoever's going to be starting at quarterback, who knows? And then week 4, another division game at home against the Tampa Bay Bucks. Is it going to be Baker Mayfield? Is it going to be Kyle Trask? Either way, you don't want to underestimate either of your division opponents, not including the Bucks. And then way down in week 12 in Atlanta against the Falcons. A big test awaits in this very weak-ass division. Let's see how Desmond Ridder and those Dirty Birds are by that point. Who knows? They could be competing for that division crown too. So with all that being said, my biggest question is going to be around the quarterback position. Is Derek Carr really the answer for this Saints team? It may be an upgrade over Andy Dalton and maybe even Jameis Winston and even Taysom Hill. But when you looked at his play last year and even the play before 2021, it went down. It went down after his good 2021 and even his good 2016. So something was just not right with Derek Carr in 2022. I don't know if his failure to adapt to Josh McDaniels or, well, there's something definitely wrong with him. But he just could not connect with Devontae Adams. He could not connect with Hunter Renfrow the same way that he could in 2021 in that back half crazy run with Versace as the interim coach. So the other thing is that he was shut down in those final 2 games as the Raiders tried to keep him healthy for a potential offseason trade, and he was mad about that. I was like, you're not in like a position to like compete for a playoff spot or anything. So it's like, what was the difference, man? And now there's these conflicting reports that either the Raiders actually did bench him or Derek Carr abandoned them. So it's like, damn, dude, like what's really going on here? But that's besides the point. It's like, is Derek Carr going to show the toughness, like these tangible skills, like the toughness, leadership, that's going to be just as important as his playing skills in 2022? Because looking at his playing skills, he defers to the check down a lot. He really does. Sure, there'll be times where he gets aggressive, throws a deep ball, but most of the time, he just prefers like middle of the field, check down, and all that. And he also doesn't come in clutch very often, especially during nut busting time. So it is fair to wonder if this latest gamble by New Orleans is going to pay off. Keep in mind, they did sign him to a big fat contract. So, for the Saints, they did make some solid moves to help out its aging players. And of course, you had that big Derek Carr move during the offseason. I just don't think it's going to be enough to escape mediocrity. Again, I might be proven wrong. And then keep in mind, this is the second time that Derek Carr is going to be playing under Dennis Allen. His first head coach when he came into the league. And, that didn't exactly go well 9 years ago. Who knows if it's going to be any different this time around. But for the team as a whole, I don't think it's going to be that much different in 2023. I imagine they get the exact same record at 7-10, maybe 8-9 if I'm generous. But anyway, I don't see New Orleans and that team make things. I don't think it's going to get any easier in 2023. Might even get even harder for them with Derek Carr as their new quarterback. The third team on our NFC South Division preview is, we're going from New Orleans to North Carolina to take a look at the Carolina Panthers. Carolina was, just in about the same position as New Orleans and Atlanta were in 2022. And competing for that crappy NFC South Division title. Well, why is that? Well, in 2022, going in, there weren't really a lot of expectations for them, especially considering that their micromanaging head coach, Matt Rule, was still sticking up the joint, and he made another bad decision by trading for Baker Mayfield when he already had Sam Darnold on the team. So keep in mind, though, that Sam Darnold was injured. He wasn't ready to play, so they got Baker Mayfield. So just keep that in mind, though. And that decision went poorly because they started the season 1-4 because of Matt Rule, the Fool's coaching, and Baker Mayfield's poor play. Consider that. So they got rid of Matt Rule, the Fool. They fired him after losing to the 49ers. And then Baker Mayfield eventually would get waived deep into the season. And he actually got benched prior to that. So with both of those things in mind, now that Steve Wilks, their defensive passing game coordinator, stepped in as the interim head coach, the Panthers would actually win enough games to keep them within reach of that NFC South crown. Yes, that crappy one. They won enough games thanks to their defense and a decent running back committee. To keep pace with the struggling Tampa Bay Bucks. So now, late in the season, you do get Sam Darnold back. He's not terrible, outright terrible, but he's also not great. But at least what he did do was at least kind of protect the football. That's something that PJ Walker and Baker Mayfield couldn't do. So the Panthers, they get into the point of this de facto NFC title game late in the season on New Year's Day against the Tampa Bay Bucks. they actually were on the verge of winning that, and then they blew their chance, and they get eliminated from contention. Yeah, with literally 2 weeks left in the season. So overall, not really exactly a good season for Carolina, but I'd say you almost made it. You almost made it, I guess. So yeah, you ended your season 7-10, but it is clear as day that you really need some work still. You really need some work for the Panthers. So looking at their offseason, what I prioritized for them is that, well, because they won so many games, they were now down to the 9th overall pick in the draft. Even then, they still had to get a quarterback. The question was, would their quarterback be there by that point? So it was going to be an interesting choice for them. Do they find a way to get that quarterback at 9? Hopefully that they would slide down there, or do they make a big move to go up some in the draft? And then they have to retool the offensive line because it wasn't exactly great in 2023. 2023. We're going way hard ahead. 2022. Because, yeah, whatever, Sam Darnold, PJ Walker, or Sam Darnold, not great. They also had to find a running back to replace Christian McCaffrey because, well, they traded him midseason to the 49ers, and they had to go by committee, and the committee was fine, but it became less sustainable in the final weeks of the season. So, yeah, not very too reliable there. So, once the offseason came around, they managed to find a permanent head coach by the name of Frank Reich. He was unjustly fired from the Indianapolis Colts like early in the season for Jeff Saturday. Yes, Jeff Saturday, ladies and gentlemen, that disaster. And fortunately, Frank Reich escaped that disaster to become the Panthers head coach. But we'll see how this works out. So the Panthers then made the big move of the offseason, one of them at least, by trading for the Chicago Bears' first overall pick in the draft in return for their 9th pick. And they also gave away receiver DJ Moore, along with more draft picks. So probably the biggest move in this, probably the biggest piece in this move was giving away DJ Moore. It's kind of a fair compromise, but at the same time, it's like, wow, they really gave away their top receiver. And now whoever's going to be the quarterback, it's like, who am I going to throw to? But fortunately for Carolina, they kind of rectified this in their free agency. So looking at who they lost first, honestly, not too many. They didn't really lose too many players of note. I mean, you did lose DJ Moore in that trade. So, yeah, that was a big loss. They also lost backup quarterback Sam Darnold, but you can live without him. They also lost linebacker Corey Littleton to the Houston Texans. I mean, you can find another replacement for him anyway. Looking at the players that they re-signed, kicker Eddie Pinheiro, surprisingly very reliable for them throughout the season. So he was also very clutch for them too, surprisingly. Center Bradley Bozeman on the offensive line, guard Michael Jordan. Yes, Michael Jordan, ladies and gentlemen. No, I'm just kidding. Not the basketball player. And looking at some of their free agency moves, that's when they decided to go big. They signed Miles Sanders away from the Philadelphia Eagles. He could be a big addition to their backfield. I wouldn't say Christian McCaffrey replacement, but it's still a big move. He had a big 2022 and key part of that Eagles' deadly offense. So perhaps he provides something of value for the Carolina Panthers run game. I do think that they still could use another running back, though. They also got Adam Thielen from the Minnesota Vikings when he got released. DJ Chark from the Detroit Lions. So now you have two receivers to go along with your new quarterback. So hey, at least they replenished there. Tight end Hayden Hurst from the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think it is a decent move there. And then an interesting one. Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton from the New Orleans Saints. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the mediocre quarterback, Andy Dalton. And Panthers fans were like, really? Andy Dalton? It's like we have to suffer to Andy Dalton? But don't fret about that yet. Safety Von Bell from the Cincinnati Bengals. So a big add to that strong defense from last year. And then that's when the Panthers really got to work in the NFL draft. Because with the number one overall pick that they traded for, they got their potential franchise quarterback. They got their potential guy that they wanted. And that was from Alabama, Bryce Young. So I talked about Bryce Young in my scouting report. I liked a lot what he presented. He was fast. He was very smart with the football. He had a good deep ball throw. My only question was his size. He was not very short, but he's like not like exactly tall either. So there's a lot of size concerns I had with Bryce Young, but I thought he could overcome that here in Carolina, but that remains to be seen. So now obviously your goal for Carolina is to continue to get him support. And that's exactly what he did. They did, at least. They got another receiver by the name of John Domingo from Ole Miss, an edge rusher on the defensive side, DJ Johnson from Oregon, and then they beefed up a little on the offensive line, Chandler Zavala from North Carolina State, and then with their last move, safety Jamie Robinson from Florida State. So obviously, one of your goals for 2023 is to perhaps maybe get Bryce Young in as starter by midseason, but who knows if he'll be ready by then. Maybe you'll still have Andy Dalton as your starter. I don't know. It all depends on how things go by training camp, I say. How training camp goes, how preseason goes. We'll see if Bryce Young is ready to go. But the big takeaway I saw from this Panthers offseason is that they have an opportunity to not just rebuild, but contend at the same time, because they put with all these signings, they have an opportunity to do both. It's kind of weird to say because, first and foremost, they're in a crappy NFC South Division. So not only do they have a quarterback, not only do they now have the support around him to help him out, they can compete too. And that all depends on how well he plays. So there's a very real chance that, sure, Bryce Young will have his struggles, but there's also a real chance that the rest of the division struggles too. And that could open the door for Carolina to go and grab that division title, even with the losing record. So looking at their key division games in 2023, I'd say for now, it's just the first game, the first home game against New Orleans, because you want to see if it's going to be Bryce Young starting, you have to find out how he can handle the pressure at home against potentially a good or maybe solid defense in New Orleans. You also want to see how that defense performs against Derek Carr on the road. So, yeah, that first game at home in week 2 against New Orleans Saints, it's going to be vital. It really is going to be vital. So I guess the biggest question I have for the Carolina Panthers going into 2023, obviously it's the first one is, when does Frank Reich get the keys to Bryce Young? Like, is he going to be impressed enough with preseason and training camp, like with how well Bryce Young, or maybe not Bryce Young, is, that he starts right away? We shall see. It's going to be a battle between Young and Andy Dalton. Can Bryce Young impress enough to supplant Andy Dalton as the starter? Or are we going to have to go through a couple games with Andy Dalton struggling so midly that Frank Reich is eventually going to have to put in Bryce Young as the starter? And then, who's going to be that top receiving option? Who's going to be Bryce Young's preferred go-to guy? And yeah, I say this because, the Panthers did their due diligence at the receiving position. Now they just have to figure out who's going to be that preferred option for him. Is it going to be Adam Thielen, DJ Clark, Anthony Mingo, or Jonathan Mingo, or sorry, trying to remember names here. Who's going to be that number one guy for Bryce Young? Or maybe they won't be. I don't know. So the Panthers, they had themselves a very solid offseason, reshaping their offense and, getting a couple of solid pieces on defense. And of course, they got that big move to get their potential franchise quarterback in Bryce Young from Alabama. Now they have to address the next step. How does it all come together on the field? They do have a very good shot to compete in a very putrid NFC South because, their schedule outside of a few teams is not that daunting, to be honest with you. And depending on how and when Frank Reich inserts Young, the Panthers can give them a really good shot in the arm of winning this NFC South. So maybe, again, like I said, even 8-9 might be enough to win this very poor division. But again, it's all going to depend on when Frank Reich, the head coach, gives Bryce Young the keys to the car, and maybe even the kitty for him to ride on as well. So we'll see if Bryce Young will be ready to go by week 1 for this Carolina Panthers team in 2023. So for our final team in our NFC South Division preview and NFL season preview month part 3, 2023, is, well, the team that's heralding the ship down in Tampa, Florida, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, for the Tampa Bay Bucs, last season was what's supposed to be this season now, a rebuilding season. However, those plans were derailed by the sudden unretirement of their quarterback. Yes, the 20-year quarterback that was the franchise face of the NFL, Tom Brady. You know, the same Tom Brady that's won 7 Super Bowl rings, including the last one where he won it on the Tampa Bay Bucs home field. Yeah, Super Bowl 55, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, he decided to play one last season, unretire, and hopefully win one last Super Bowl ring, an 8th one. Yeah, that magic 8 ball. But that decision actually turned out to be pretty fatal. Why? Because the Bucs all around in 2022 were very bad. They were awful. Like, on offense, they never got right. Like, somehow, somewhere, like, they just did not look right at all. Tom Brady, it looked like death's door, father time, finally caught up to him. There were just injuries all around. The offensive line was a mess because of the injuries. Like the playoffs prior, it just never gelled together. Defensively, one of the worst in the league. Like, even with all those big names there, just not good at all. And yeah, they just never got right. Even with the late season push to win the NFC South, they just got lucky that they won that crappy, that the whole division was crappy. So they won the NFC South with the losing record. And, well, they were rewarded for it with a mollywhopping, with an ass whooping by the Dallas Cowboys in prime time on Monday night. So, yeah, that game ended up being Tom Brady's last game ever. Yeah, literally going out on a whimper, like, for a guy like Brady's stature, like, oof. So he ended up retiring for real this time, weeks later. And yeah, here we are with the Tampa Bay Bucs in the season that was supposed to be last year, a rebuilding one. So yeah, they ended their season 8-9. They didn't exactly end on a very high note what they were supposed to do, win one last one for Tom Brady. And now they go into this season, well, basically where they were before Tom Brady. They have to find out which quarterback can be a long-term answer. They basically have 2. We'll get into the second one in just a bit. But before we had the second one, we had Kyle Trask, the quarterback that was drafted in the second round in 2021. So now you have to figure out, can he be that guy, or is it going to be the other one? So we're going to get to that in a bit. So some of their team needs in this past offseason, when I talked about them, obviously the biggest one was finding that successor to Tom Brady. It certainly was going to be easy for them because, well, they had more than enough red cash. So they're basically in the red more than New Orleans Saints. So it was that bad. They were strapped for cash real damn hard in the offseason. So finding a guy that can lead your team was not going to be easy. Someone to challenge Kyle Trask for the starting spot. So finding Tom Brady's successor was not going to be some easy feat that was going to be like overnight. And then defensively, yeah, there's a lot of needs there, but they had to pick and choose because of the salary cap space. You had to pick and choose between corner or linebacker because those two positions were just not good in 2022, even with those big names. So we'll get into those big names in a bit. And then you had to fix up the interior offensive line because those big names like Ryan Jensen, Donovan Smith, it just was when they got hurt. It's just like the offensive line was a mess. It was like really bad in 2022, and Tom Brady, he suffered as a result. So that also played into a fact that why he didn't do well last year. So looking at their whole offseason as a whole, when aside from, of course, Tom Brady retiring, they had to restructure some contracts like Carlton Davis, Ryan Jensen, Chris Godwin, Vita Vea, just to get under the salary cap. They also had to make a couple of big releases. They had to release Cameron Brate, the tight end, Leonard Fournette, like a key player in that Super Bowl run in 2020. Like, they had to let him go. Like, rough. Like, damn. And then they also released Ryan Suckup, one of their most reliable kickers in the league. Like, wow, that was a little bit of a surprising move, but damn. They also released Donovan Smith as well. He later went on to go sign with the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, wow. All together under the salary cap. But, hey, that's what you got to do after you have made an all-in run. So, they also made a surprising move to fire offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich after the season. So, a little odd, considering that he was kind of the least of their troubles. And that's just my opinion, at least. But a little bit weird. Maybe he was made as a scapegoat for the many problems that the Tampa Bay Bucks had in 2022. But either way, he was replaced by former Seahawks quarterbacks coach Dave Canales as the new offensive coordinator. So we'll see how that pans out. Looking at some of their free agency and draft moves, they re-signed corner Jamal Dean to a big fat contract, and so did Levante David, the linebacker. Two key pieces in that Super Bowl run. They did lose Sean Murphy Bunting to the Tennessee Titans, so another key piece from that Super Bowl run gone. So is Mike Edwards, the safety, to the Chiefs. Keanu Neal, another safety, to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They traded away guard Shaq Mason, I don't know why, to the Houston Texans, so another piece of that offensive line is gone. And I don't understand. Like, you really need to protect your quarterback here. So anyway, looking at some of their additions on free agency for as many as they tried to get under the salary cap. Of course, the biggest one that they made was Baker Mayfield. Yeah, really. Baker Mayfield from the LA Rams. So, yeah, that's going to be the quarterback that's competing with Kyle Trask. And, you know, I get it. Like, they can't really do much. Can't really get much quarterback competition because, well, they're under the salary cap. They also got a running back by the name of Chase Edmonds from the Denver Broncos. They did replace Ryan Suckup with Chase McLaughlin from the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, McLaughlin was actually decent when Rodrigo Blankenship got hurt. Safety Ryan Neal from the Seattle Seahawks. So, yeah, I'd say it's okay. This was okay for agency pickups. The draft class. Defensive tackle Khalija Cansey from Pittsburgh. So, an interior defensive lineman to potentially help out a pass rush that was not good in 2022 with all the injuries. Guard Cody Mauch from North Dakota State. Maybe as a move to counteract trading away Shaq Mason. So, now I'm not as mad about it. Edge rusher Yeye Diaby from Louisville. And then receiver Trey Palmer from Nebraska. A little interesting. Maybe he's just a reserve receiver to replace Scotty Miller. Oh, yeah, they released they let Scotty Miller go to the I think it was the Falcons. Yeah. So anyway, looking at the Bucks offseason, obviously not an easy one to take in if you're a Bucks fan, especially considering all that has happened in the last couple of years with Tom Brady and winning a Super Bowl. So yeah, not an easy one to take in. You're basically back where you were. And like I said, replacing Tom Brady is obviously not going to be easy. This quarterback competition that's going to be taking place is going to continue along for the whole 9 yards, pretty much up until the regular season. So we're going to see if it's going to be Baker Mayfield or is it going to be Kyle Trask. So far, there hasn't really been a definitive answer because, yeah, it's like, we'll see how it goes. And then the defense is obviously going to take an even bigger dip in 2023 because, well, the salary cap was a large part in why they couldn't keep their core together. Like all the names that I literally just blurted out. But still, even with all those players there, it's like they just really struggled last year. Like they were like Murphy Bunting, and then you also had Jamal Dean. They were struggling really, really bad against even the worst quarterbacks out there. Like, did you I always point to this game out, but look at the Week 14 game against the 49ers. Like, it's a 7th round quarterback. Like they did not look good And then, of course, and then week 15 against the Cincinnati Bengals, you had most of your defensive starters back. And then you did bad. You did really bad in that game. So this defense, with all those good players that struggled last year, there's even less talent on that defense. They're going to struggle even harder than they did last year. So looking at some of your key potential games of 2023, you look at week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. Whoever's going to be a starting quarterback is going to have a tall task. Sure, you're playing Kirk Cousins in the Minnesota Vikings, but you can't really look down upon whether how good or bad that like Vikings defense is going to be, or how good or bad Kirk Cousins is going to play, because they can still light you up. They can still light you up because how Kirk Cousins and the Vikings can be against inferior teams. And then the real test soon starts to begin with a home slate that consists of potentially the new and improved Chicago Bears, and then the reigning NFC champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think the Philadelphia Eagles is on a primetime night, Monday night. Oh, ouch. Yeah, that's not going to be good. And then week 4, you have your first division game against the New Orleans Saints. So, yeah, another tall task forever if it's going to be Kyle Trask or Baker Mayfield. So, they better be ready for that. So, who's going to be that starting quarterback? That's probably the biggest question of all that I have here, and probably the only one. Nothing else matters, to be honest with you, until we figure out who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Tampa Bay Bucks going into a rebuilding season. Yes, it doesn't matter. Like, if the talent is there defensively, sure, you still have receivers like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, whoever's there. It doesn't matter until you figure out the quarterback spot. Is it going to be Baker Mayfield? He provides you experience, but not a lot of good experience, though. If you go with Kyle Trask, you have to answer the questions, what can he provide you? Because he didn't start any games yet. So you walk into that unknown. So for the Bucks, they're going into a long couple of weeks here with training camp and the preseason. So it's still going to be a long battle until we reach to September, when we figure out who's going to be that starting quarterback, Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask. But either way, the Bucks faced a lot of roster turnaround, and it all started with Tom Brady retiring for good. At least he is, right? So it was a matter of time, I mean, I don't say that's a bad thing, but it's just, what did they say it? Father time always comes around, like what Becky Lynch always says, but I don't like to say it when Becky Lynch says, the man comes around, pal. But, once Father time did come around, dominoes started to fall. You saw releases left and right to get under the salary cap. Players start to leave via free agency, especially considering that the Bucks had the league's worst salary cap situation. Like, I think it was at the time, negative $55 million. That's even worse than the Saints. Ugh. So, there's still some talent from that Super Bowl roster that can still salvage a couple wins, but this drop off from Brady to whoever's going to be the quarterback, I feel like it's going to be felt heavily. It's really going to be felt heavily, and the Bucks are going to find themselves back to where they were before they got Tom Brady. So, I feel like the drop off is going to be massive. 5-12. I'm not going to slice it. I'm not going to slice it. I know it's harsh, but it's just kind of reality. Maybe they go that way to, maybe if the quarterback's not there on the team right now, maybe that's where they go for next year. But either way, at least the Bucks do have a Super Bowl, but it's just like, yeah, sorry, Tampa. The glory days are over, and 2023 is going to be the start of that. And with that is a wrap on part 3 of our NFL season preview coverage 2023. And yeah, we talked about the NFC South in this episode. The Carolina Panthers, the Atlanta Falcons, the New Orleans Saints, and the Tampa Bay Bucks. Whether or not you're a fan of these teams, I'd like to know your thoughts and opinions on either 4 of these teams or maybe all these teams in the comments on YouTube or a DM on social media at Very Cold Lasagna on Twitter and Instagram. Yeah, let's start a conversation on all these teams. Yeah, and keep that gravy train rolling on your takes. So, yeah, I'd like to hear what you guys think about either of these teams in the NFC South heading into 2023. So, yeah, we're getting there. I say we're quarter day there into NFL season review month. And in the next episode, we're going to be talking about the NFC East, a more competitive division, in my opinion, at least. So that's the next episode. But for now, that's a wrap on episode number 151 of Very Cold Lasagna. I am your filthy casual sports host, DylanLasagna. Thank you for tuning in into this episode. And keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of sports. And thank you guys so much for sticking around. And until next time, peace out.